And we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Stripe Dev Chats. My name is Cecil Phillip, and today's a special day because one, it's our last stream of the year. It is December 2022 already. So this means this is going to be our last stream of the year. Thank you all so much for being with us for the entirety of 2022. I hope you all had an amazing year, and I look forward to seeing you all in 2023. Now, another reason why this is a special episode is because if y'all have been watching the show, y'all should know that, we have an affinity for GraphQL. A lot of folks have come on and talked to us about GraphQL libraries and patterns and practices, and a lot of different types of things like that. But what we're going to talk about today is an interesting open source project called Nhost. And with Nhost, my understanding, I've never tried it before, but Nhost, my understanding is an open source alternative to Firebase. If you have all have ever used Firebase before, it comes with like storage and authentication and tons of other stuff. So I'm really curious and interested to see, what this project is all about and how we can help build Stripe applications on top of that. And so my friend here from Nhost is going to talk to us all about it. So Johan, why don't you introduce yourself very quickly, tell folks a little bit about who you are and what do you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Johan. I'm CEO and co-founder of Nhost. I born and raised in Sweden, and what more can I tell you? I just love building things like most engineers, and I really like building things with a business focus. So the reason I started Nhost was I don't want to spend time on configuring infrastructure or servers or setting up databases. I just want to build the product that I have in my mind that can provide and spend all my time focusing on providing value to my application I'm building and to the users I'm building for. So that's in a nutshell who I am and what I do.
I'm always really interested to talk to developers that have started companies or started projects, because I feel like as developers, that entrepreneurial muscle isn't always natural to us, And so I know you said like you like building stuff. What about you made you think, hey, I want to create like a whole project and business around GraphQL like this?
So this was a few years ago, I was kind of early on learning React in 2016 or so. And at the time, there was a lot of innovation happening on the front end. You had React, you had Vue, you had good products like Next.js, Vercel, and Netlify and GraphQL also. So there was really good tools for front-end engineers, but not for full-stack engineers, or like what backend do you use? And at the time, there was really two alternatives. It was either use Google Firebase or build your own backend. Like for me, it was go to DigitalOcean, spin up a server and configuring everything and maybe create an Express app. And I didn't want to spend time on that. I just wanted to give me something that works, give me something that I can be productive in, and then I can focus on the fun things. So I didn't want to use Firebase because of a few reasons. One being it's not open source. But also, as you mentioned, like GraphQL was an important part of that as well as a relational database was also important for me. I'm old enough to use MySQL for some time, and I didn't want to use any NoSQL database. So that was also part of it. So it didn't exist. So being an engineer, you can build things yourself, and so that's what I did.
Nice. That sounds amazing, man. And I always appreciate people that have that energy to go forward and do stuff like that. Because again, like starting stuff is always the hard part, right? I always find that, right? And so we definitely appreciate you and like the work you've done to kind of like bring this project to fruition. Now, the first thing I want to start off with before like we even get into Nhost itself is, so the project is open source, right? What made you did you ever have at any point in time in your head, hey, I want to make this a closed source for-profit only company or open source and open to the community? Like, do you ever have like those battles in your head about like what is the best way for me to start and kind of go forward?
Not really. Being an open source company, you kind of need to find your boundaries. What is closed source and what is open source? For us, for us, the whole Nhost stack is open source, so anyone can go to our GitHub repository and get a Docker Compose file and spin up the Nhost stack without an issue. Whereas our infrastructure is closed source, so that's the boundary that we put. But never in my I think it would be much harder for us to make the Nhost stack closed source. I don't know. It would be harder for us to now. How do you do development environments, for example, if you want to develop locally? And also there's a huge push for open source. Like imagine building an application and you're not allowed to use open source. Like how do you even do that? What tools do you pick? So everything is going open source. So I think it's just natural. Developers love open source, etc. So there's a lot of value for it. But being a company, you need to understand, okay, what is open source? What is Nhost? What is it? Where can we provide value and get revenue from? But what can we give out for free and not to be open source?
Sure, that makes sense. Okay, so now we got that little bit of an intro. Why don't we talk really about what we came to talk about, which is Nhost? And so give us let's start off with the quick elevator pitch. You know what I mean? Like really quickly, like what is Nhost and what types of problems do you think it's solving for developers today? Yeah,
so I think the quickest way to communicate this is saying that Nhost is an open source Firebase alternative. I think a lot of developers have tried Firebase before. So that gives you a quick understanding. But being a bit more specific, so what we do is we provide a backend, being a database, a Postgres database. On top of that is a GraphQL API using Hasura's GraphQL engine, which will automatically generate a GraphQL CRUD for you based on your tables and columns in your database. So you have an instant GraphQL API. And then on top of that, we have authentication, meaning you can sign in users with email, password, magic link, Facebook, Google, etc. And then storage, so you can let your users upload documents, images, and serve them in your application. And then the last thing we provide is serverless functions. So remember, I said we provide an instant GraphQL API for you. That's like basic CRUD, but you're probably going to need to do some custom business logic, and that's where we provide serverless functions. And they work very much like Next.js, for example. You just have a functions folder. You create your JavaScript or TypeScript files there, and we will just deploy them to AWS Lambda for you.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And so it kind of sounds like now I'm building my backend as a service using Nhost, right? Like all the things that I could pretty much need from a backend. Like you said, I have security, I have storage, I have APIs, like you support it using GraphQL in the front. I could do that with Nhost. Now, one of the things I'm curious about every time I see frameworks like this is how pluggable are some of these components, right? Because when I think about open source too, I also think about, folks now have the opportunity to kind of be flexible a little bit and pick and choose what to run on. So for instance, you would start off saying, hey, I could use, emails and passwords or Facebook or some social auth or whatever for authentication. So for me, I'm like, okay, well, that's the pluggable piece for that. What about this, the storage components and stuff like that? Are those also, hey, I could host this on, I don't know, MongoDB, or I could host this on, Postgres or something are those things possible, at least with the open source version today?
Yeah, so what we try to do with our offering is to be very opinionated in the technologies. It's going to be Postgres, it's going to be GraphQL, etc. And then we try to not create abstraction above that. So for example, our storage module, it's just upload files, download files, and then there is no magic happening in between. Same thing for Postgres and GraphQL. Everything you can do with Postgres, you can do with an Nhost backend because it's just Postgres. Or anything you can do with Hasura, you can do with our product as well because it's just Hasura GraphQL engine. So we try to not create in unnecessary abstractions on top of really good tools that already exist out there. So that's a fine balance. But and in terms of pluggability, you can plug in. We have a lot of customers using different services alongside the Nhost stack for specific tasks that they might do. But I would say somewhere around 70 to 80% of what you need in your app can be facilitated with what we provide because we really try to provide the general building blocks for any application here. And I should also say that I don't see Nhost as yet another hosting company. Like we do more than just hosting. For example, we have SDKs in JavaScript, React, Next.js, Vue. So it's really easy to hook, start a Next.js or React application, and hook in our libraries to sign in someone or send a GraphQL request or upload a file. So that's one part. Another part is we really try to be kind of like Netlify and Vercel, but for the backend. So we have like a CLI, so you can develop locally. We have a Git integration. You just connect everything with a GitHub account, and you just push your code, and we will deploy it for you. So not only a hosting company, but also help you with SDKs in various frameworks, but also helping you with the workflow. So as I mentioned, CLI to develop locally. We track database migrations. You can just commit your code, push it, and we will deploy it automatically.
Got it. Okay. We got some questions coming in from the chat, so why don't we take a look at some of these? So this one's coming in from Twitch right now, and question is, any roadmap for other SDKs? And the follow-up comment to this was like Ruby or C# or any other of those types of languages.
It's not on our roadmap, but it's not on our roadmap, but they are not scheduled, let's say. So we definitely want to support multiple languages. For now, we're focusing on 2, which is JavaScript/TypeScript and Flutter. And then a subset of those would be, as I mentioned, React, Next, and Vue. But yeah, I think that the next one we will start is probably Python, and then kind of go from there.
Got it. Okay. And I guess in the follow-up to that question, then I'll assume that if folks head over to nhost.io, right? Or even like github.nhost.io, because like you said, you are open source, and there is the GitHub repo. I'm going to pull up the GitHub repo, and it's on the bottom of the screen so folks could see it right now. I'm guessing if they go there, they should be able to see at least like the API spec or the API definition, like the public definition. So if you wanted to just make raw HTTP calls without using an SDK, like you should be able to see the documentation and know like what the required parameters are, what the return types look like, and those types of things. So even though there's not official SDKs, they could still use it, right? Because we're just talking about HTTP at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's just wrappers around either HTTP or GraphQL. So it's fairly simple in that sense. There are some tokens that you need to also take into consideration when you're authenticating users, etc. But fairly straightforward.
So then, would you say that if I have a GraphQL client in another language, like so, for instance, in C#, I know there's hot chocolate, and I think it's called like strawberry shortcake or something like that. Is what their library is called. But it's as far as I know, it's like just standard compliant GraphQL. Like there's nothing extra there. Should those clients just be able to talk to Nhost without any types of major modifications?
So when you create a project on Nhost and you start creating your tables and your data models, you can that will just generate a GraphQL server and API for you, and you can use any GraphQL client in any framework or language, because it follows the GraphQL spec. So
So then that makes sense. So the only other things that I would be concerned about, I'm gonna guess, are going to be like the authentication, for instance, like plugging that in now would be a little bit different. Because no, that's more than just making, that's more than just making API calls, right? Like that's a little bit more involved. But other than that, like we should also be able to see docs for that too, if we head over to like, again, the link below or even to nhost.io. Cool. So why don't we do this? Why don't we take a look at some demos, right? Like maybe let's give the folks like a little bit of an understanding about like what it actually looks like to like get set up with Nhost, and what does crafting a service look like? Because we're developers, right? Developers like to see stuff. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna take this link off, and whenever you're ready, I'm gonna switch over to your screen, and then we could take a look at some stuff.
Let's do it.
All right. So your screen is up right now, right? And so right now we're seeing, it looks like the Nhost dashboard, I'm guessing is what this is.
Yeah, so this is Nhost dashboard, and I'm in an example project that I have here. And here to the left, you can see the various components that is available for every project. So I have the database, and this one is kind of like we built like an Airtable type of UI on top of Postgres. So here you can actually control your database, insert data, start modifying data here, etc. So this is kind of like an Airtable spreadsheet type of UI on top of Postgres. Then you have GraphQL. This is a playground, so you can play around with everything that you have in your database. So like there's some docs maybe. I don't know what I have here actually. Let's see. Right, yeah.
So then you have the autocomplete, you have the editor, like everything that people will be familiar with when it comes to GraphQL, at least from an editing perspective, like that's available here that they could play around with.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I can take a different example. I will take a different example here. So for example, here I have customers. For example, I have customer files. No, I don't have this connected. Maybe this one, books and authors. Okay, so here books, and there's a column foreign key to authors. So they're in two different tables in a standard relational database. But given that they are connected with a foreign key here from, maybe I can show you that. So here's a foreign key between author ID and public authors ID, this table and column. So that enables, given that foreign key in Postgres, we will automatically track a GraphQL relationship for you. So you can do things like books, ID, probably title. Okay, this is all our books. And then we can do author. So we can see what is the author for that book.
Nice.
And also the opposite. So we can do author, ID, name, and then books. Just by modeling the data in Postgres. All right, so that's GraphQL. And then Hasura, I mentioned Hasura is the GraphQL engine that we're using. You have access to they also have a different UI that you can use if you want to go a bit more deeper into every setting that is available in Hasura. And then authentication, this is where you manage your users' various, Magic Link, or if they're signing in with Google or GitHub or similar. Storage, just a simple yet powerful type of service. You just upload files here and they're available. And they actually exist with the metadata in your Postgres database. You can create relationships with your storage objects here as well. And we serve them over a CDN. Functions, I don't have anything connected here. Deployments is what I mentioned before. Let me jump into a different project that has this set up. So deployments is everyone who's tried Vercel or Netlify, they know what it is. If something is pushed to GitHub, we automatically deploy database migrations, Hasura metadata, this is the GraphQL metadata, and then serverless functions. We're actually also deploying email templates for email templates being when someone signs up, they will send an email. So these type of templates.
Nice. So I want to pause for a second.
Yep.
And I want to go back to a comment that you had made before, because I think it's important, right? And I feel like we kind of like floated over it. Is the fact that you're saying that you're sitting on top of Hasura, at least when it comes to like the GraphQL aspect of it.
Yep.
The reason why I think it's important, because the question that I was going to ask is like how compliant, I guess is the word, like how GraphQL compliant is Nhost, right? But now based on what you said, I'm going to assume the majority of what Hasura can do, like you have that exposed, at least from a GraphQL perspective. Would that be correct?
Yeah.
Or are there things that are like turned off and locked down for reasons that you can't do? No,
so this is a raw Hasura GraphQL instance that you get when you create an Nhost project. We don't do any magic around it. It's there. Everything that is open source in Hasura's GraphQL engine is there as well. So and I think that's important for us. Like we don't want to build abstractions or do magic things around it.
Yeah.
It's just a Postgres database. You can go here to settings, database, and connect directly to the database and have root access to your Postgres database. You can go directly to Hasura and open the console here, and you have full access to every setting you can do in Hasura, every little detail you can imagine. And so we're like, what we're trying to do here is giving, I mentioned like we're being opinionated. We're saying, hey, it's going to be Postgres, it's going to be Hasura, but what we will do is host them for you and configure them together so they work very well together. But then it's up to you to build, your application and do everything that you need to do as a developer on your side.
So that means like a lot of the other stuff that I know Hasura supports. So if you think about like triggers and actions, and I think they have support for like observability. I think some tracing of some sort. And then what's that thing called? I think it's called Federation, right? Are those things supported, like or at least enabled out of the box?
Everything is there. Everything's there. I can give you a quick demo on it as well. So you see here, we actually a few weeks ago we launched an open source Stripe GraphQL API, for example, to actually use the remote schema to connect data from Stripe with your database.
Oh, very cool.
So that's also I can show you.
I love how you just sneak that in very casually. Oh, we just released this open source Stripe database last week. Oh, not a big deal. So tell me. Well, let's go through what you're going to show us, but then I definitely want to circle back around that to learn a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do a super high level on this then. So with the Hasura. So first of all, Hasura is amazing. You can do a lot of things with Hasura. One of the amazing things is you can hook in a remote schema, meaning a different GraphQL server, together with your already existing GraphQL server in Hasura. So that's what I'm doing here. So I have a serverless function. Let's see if I can show it quickly.
And your serverless function is also hosted in Nhost, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. Okay. So here I have an Nhost project. I have a functions folder, and inside the functions folder, I have a GraphQL folder and a Stripe file, and that will turn into an endpoint for me. So it will turn into functions GraphQL Stripe here. So that's the endpoint that I'm loading. I'm saying to Hasura, here is my open source GraphQL API for Stripe. So go look here. And then we just have this very simple way of importing the Stripe GraphQL server. And I can just create it here. And then I can also provide an isAllowed function, which can make sure that the user who makes the request is only allowed to see his or her, Stripe customer data. Okay. I didn't include it here yet, but that's kind of how it is. So now everything is true, kind of insecure, but just as a demo purpose.
Nice. Okay.
Okay. So now I have this Stripe object here. So now I can go to Hasura and I'll show you. So I can do things like Stripe. So now I'm on Stripe's server requesting data. And we can see here what we can request. So customers, data, maybe recognize this from the Stripe.
Yeah. So you may have addresses, phone numbers, all that types of information, customer ID, so on and so forth.
Right. So this is an actual Stripe customer here, actually. So this Stripe customer. We can confirm it by copying here and see that it's the same ID. So so I hooked in a remote schema, used a serverless function that generated this Stripe GraphQL API for me, and now it's available here in Hasura. And what is really cool is now I'm getting excited here, but what so I can do things like I have a profiles table and I have a Stripe customer ID column with a Stripe customer, and what I can do is create a relationship and this is in my database, right? So this is profiles table inside my database, and I can create a relationship from this table to Stripe.
Right. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. So now I can do things like query, users, ID, display name, display name. So here are all my users in my database, and I'm going to follow I'm just going to go to every user has a profile, and every user has a profile with a Stripe customer ID inside of it. So now I'm still requesting data from Postgres, but now I can go to Stripe and request data. I can do things like name, invoices, data, ID, I don't know, what is it, PDF, something. So in one single request, I'm getting data from Postgres. Sorry, here is Postgres. And then I'm GraphQL allows me to combine different data sources like this. So now I'm requesting data from Postgres, but also requesting data from Stripe directly.
That's amazing. So like, no, kind of like you said, like you almost did like a remote join. Almost, I feel like
yeah, that's what it is, right? Like, it's exactly what it is. Like I did a remote join between my Postgres database and Stripe's API through GraphQL.
Got it. Okay. Questions about that coming in from YouTube really quickly. One of our guests, Tim Manning, is asking, does this support multiple database types like document, graph, and so on and so forth?
So we support everything that Hasura supports, which is actually quite a lot. So it's obviously Postgres. Hopefully I understood the question correctly. So what databases does we support, meaning given that we use Hasura supports.
Yeah. Okay.
So what Nhost will do, we will give you one Postgres database and you have full access to that one. We'll connect it directly for you, so you can start working on your application. But you can connect multiple databases and actually Hasura supports a few different ones. So yeah, Postgres, Citus, which is I think both of these are a variation of Postgres, but then MS SQL and BigQuery. So you can hook in not only Postgres but other databases as well, to give and that will give you the same capabilities like that I already showed you here.
Nice. So then, because I'm guessing that question was around that demo you just showed. So now I could query my Stripe data hypothetically, and then the Postgres data that's inside of Hasura, like the one that you get by default, but then maybe a third join possibly to like another one of those databases.
You can do as many as you want. So
yeah, that's amazing.
So that's really the beauty of GraphQL. It's just like connecting different data sources, but then you just need to tell GraphQL where is the connection. You need to say like, okay, there is a connection between the Stripe customer ID here and a customer in Stripe, for example. So that's a very natural thing, right? Because they just say that, hey, this ID here in my database is the same as this ID in Stripe, and just connect those two, and then so I can keep querying my data.
So when you have the separate data sources like that, like I can imagine you're making a lot of network hops, right? Like I'm jumping in between remote systems to kind of make a query, right, and materialize like some type of view. Is there anything anyone should know about in terms of like how are you doing, like how performant are the queries, or like are you doing any caching on your side? Is caching a thing that we should do on our side? Like like for a large data set, right? Like what would you say would be some of like the better practices to do? Because again, like I can imagine I have thousands of Stripe customers and thousands of records inside of my Postgres database. Like how can I make sure that app still remains responsive?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the time you won't have an issue because first of all, when you're just requesting data from Postgres, for example, like I do here, even though I jump between two tables and I can add on things here, like I can do whatever. Like now I'm requesting data from 3 tables, but what happens in the background is this is being transformed into one single SQL request to Postgres, and then Postgres will return one single response. So the GraphQL engine is smart enough to understand, okay, here is like you want to get data from 3 tables, but I will make this very complicated join and send it to Postgres, and Postgres is super performant and give you back the data. So that's usually not an issue. Now, if you start requesting data from Postgres and multiple sources, I mean, that could become an issue. But this is all happening server side, and usually, so you don't have issues with 3G or Wi-Fi or whatever. Like these are, they're usually pretty well connected to the internet. So
Yeah.
I think when you I think I don't think you should worry too much about that initially.
Sure. Okay. So at least from the Nhost side, it's not a big problem. But if folks do start seeing any types of issues, again, we are developers. Developers have to write code, right? So obviously you should like test it and do your own metrics about your own application. You know what I mean? I think sometimes too, when folks see issues when it comes to query performance, sometimes it might just be the way that they're modeling the data or writing their queries as well, right? So I think there's like a lot of different things just from a practitioner's perspective, regardless of whatever you're using, that you should, obviously do some investigations, pay attention to your testing and your load balancing and, all these types of things, right? Like your query performance to see how exactly you can get like the best result from what you're trying to build. Okay.
100%.
All right. So I think that makes sense. Okay. So we saw like the GraphQL editor, and we've seen how you can connect like this stuff with remote APIs. You also mentioned that there are, I think you said there were triggers or something, like event triggers and hosted serverless functions. Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about those.
Yeah, so let's keep the context within Stripe, right? So let's say you're building an application, and every user who signs up, you want to create a Stripe customer to have a connection to that user. Yeah. And so what you can do in Hasura is you can create an event trigger. So you say on the users table, every time someone is inserting, here we have different operations, but I've just clicked in insert. So every time a user is inserted, Hasura will trigger an event and call this function. And here I have just my Nhost backend URL. This is an environment variable. And then just pointing to events, users, insert, Stripe. And this is URL and path that I defined. And we can take a look how this looks in the code. So we have functions, events, users, insert, Stripe. So every time a user is inserted, this function will run on the backend. And you can imagine what this one does. Basically, super simple. I just get the event data new. So this is the new user that was inserted, and I get the ID of that user. And here I'm requesting some more data under the hood, but basically what I'm doing is I'm making sure, is there a Stripe customer ID already? And if there is, I will just say, hey, I don't need to do anything here. Otherwise, I will create this Stripe customer, and then I will update the profile to insert this Stripe customer ID for this user.
Got it. Okay.
So this is we can take a look here actually. So customers, I only have this customer here. So if I do sign in with a magic link, see what happens now. So in both users, we have two users, one of which is myself here. And if we go to event triggers, it should have fired an event. So we can go to invocation logs. I just tested this a bit before, but this one was the one that fired just now. If we go to customer update here, there's a user in Stripe. So this one was created. We can take a look. We can copy the ID here to make sure it's the correct one. So if I go to database profiles, it's the one that was created here. So this is how you can act if something happens in your database, like something is inserted, updated, or deleted, you can do various tasks and do them asynchronously. So you can imagine here, let's say you have, 5,000 people signing up to your application in 1 minute.
Right.
What happens is 5,000 insert happens to the Postgres database. That's not an issue. And they will happen super quick. In the background, they will fire off 5,000 requests to the serverless functions that we are hosting on AWS on Lambda, and they're scaling automatically. So they will just being processed in parallel,
okay.
and then being inserted back. So this is how you can model your application to accommodate this.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. In terms of managing or handling those events, I'm guessing obviously we could do it in code. Are there any things that I could say, hey, every time this event fires, run, I don't know, run something external to my system or drop a message in a queue? Like what are all the things that I could connect to events to be able to handle them?
Yeah, I mean, so this is very low abstraction. So you're saying if something happens, send a webhook, like send the information of what happened to this endpoint,
To this place.
and
Okay.
to this place, and then then it's just JavaScript with TypeScript. So here you can do whatever. You can send an email, you can send a message to Discord, create a customer in Stripe. You can, now it's up to you to do whatever is important for your application and important to the event that just happened in your application.
Right.
So and this was what I said in the beginning. Like, it's very nice to have this CRUD API with GraphQL out of the box automatically, but there is always going to be these business specific things that you need for your application, and that's why we need to provide some way of you being able to run custom code to accommodate that, and that's exactly what functions and event triggers, what we're using that for.
Okay, that makes sense. So then, like you said, anything that I could run, and I guess in this case would be Node, right? Like I can bring in whatever npm packages or dependencies I want, code that I want to write, and then now I just have to attach it to, my function handler, right? And like it'll do whatever I need it to do.
Yeah, and this is also, this endpoint will be available on the internet, so you can call it from your front end, or you can have some other system talk with these functions, or you can have event triggers in Hasura connected to them. So they're very, you can do whatever you want with them. They are not only tied to event triggers in Hasura.
Okay, that's awesome. All right. Wow, I feel like we've spoken about a lot. There's a lot of good stuff.
So, for example, here I'm creating an endpoint under functions webhook Stripe. So here I'm basically listening for Stripe events that can happen. So if a subscription is created, I can do some things, or if a subscription is deleted, I can do some other things. So this one is so here I'm creating an endpoint with this file, and this file is then, or this endpoint is then used in Stripe to receive or send webhooks to.
Right. Okay. So we've seen a lot of code about like what this actually, like what the development experience looks like. How do I deploy this stuff? Right. Like, do you have I'm guessing, I don't know, is there like an Nhost CLI, or do I just zip up a file and upload it? Like what is the local to, Nhost in the cloud experience look like?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. We have a CLI. So here I'm running. I can restart and just to maybe that was unnecessary. But yeah, we have a CLI. You do Nhost dev or Nhost up. We will spin up a local environment for you that matches exactly what you have in production. So you have the Postgres, GraphQL, auth, storage functions, everything running locally. Let me start it again here. And you will have the Hasura console, or you can use the Nhost dashboard if you want for UI to manage this. And so here you have a complete development environment, and we will also track database migrations and other changes. So if you, maybe I can show it. Yeah, but I will not show it. But so if you create the table here, we will automatically create SQL database migrations for you. Those will be tracked in your GitHub repository. And once they are in a GitHub repository, what you can do is connect your project on Nhost to a GitHub repository, specify a branch and a base directory, and any change, like any code that is pushed to this GitHub repository and this branch and this base folder, we will deploy for you. This was a bit what I was hinting on here before. So every time you push, we will deploy it. So we will pull the code from your GitHub repository. We will apply database migrations, apply metadata, deploy all functions for you, and everything is in production within 2 minutes.
Awesome. And then I'm guessing also in that deployment section, if I wanted to, I could do rollbacks or anything of the sort, right? Like I could do those types of things if I needed to.
We don't support that yet. So if you want to do a rollback, you would either do it yourself
Do it
locally,
by Git?
or basically create a new migration that will roll back the previous one. That's usually what. But here are some definitely. It's a good idea, like rollbacks and such. With SQL, you need to be careful, but it's definitely doable.
That makes sense. So then, outside of GitHub or Git, I mean, are there other ways to deploy, or is that right now like the primary target?
That's the primary. Yeah.
Okay.
So so there's basically two ways. So either you can spin up a project here on Nhost, and you do changes directly in production. But here you can see I have a GitHub repository connected to this project. So now we're locking the database schema. So now I can't edit, create tables, etc. You need to do that locally, make sure it works, create the correct migrations, and then push your code. But if you're just starting out and you want to try something quickly, and you don't have a GitHub repository connected, now you can go here and start creating a table and play around with it. So usually that's what people are doing initially. They create a project, they create a few tables, columns, they get their API, they try out. But if you want to do more serious development and maybe you're a team of developers, you really want to get into this Git workflow together with Nhost.
Okay. We do have more questions coming in. Again, our friend Tim over on YouTube, he's asking, are webhooks available for the new Stripe one-click checkout link? So I guess a way to look at that is, I mean, do you support handling webhooks from other places?
I'm not sure I check out. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. So he's asking, so are webhooks available for the new Stripe one-click checkout link? So we have a thing called Stripe link, right? It pretty much just allows you to pre-populate information, and it, just like other things in Stripe, it fires webhooks, right? So his question is like, are webhooks available for the new one-click checkout link? So I guess the way you could look at it is like, if events fire in Stripe, like I could obviously point them to my Nhost instance for you to deal with them, right? Or do you have a different way of handling webhooks with Stripe?
No, this is basically a copy paste from your documentation, your Stripe documentation.
Good old copy.
So this is like you can act on anything here. And I don't think I have how to complete here, but any event that happens in Stripe, just listen to it here, and
and it'll be that one actually. It'll just be checkout session completed, which is the one I think it did auto completed a little bit. Yeah, it'll just be that event. It's the same event, right? It's a difference. It's a new product, I guess you could look at it, or new SKU, but like the events are the same. So yeah,
absolutely.
I think you could do that. Yeah,
that's spooky. So GitHub Copilot was listening to what we said, and then
the code listens to us when we talk. You know that, right? You better watch out. The code is listening. But Tim, let us know. Tim over on YouTube, let us know if that answered your question or not. If not, feel free to drop another one, and we could try to clarify that for you. Hopefully that makes sense. And since we've been talking about Stripe, you know what I mean? Like, so you did, obviously you've been showing us like how to use it and build it with Stripe. You did mention that there was like a Stripe API that you've been using. How did you connect like your Nhost with Stripe exactly? Like, what did you have to do anything special? Is there any special packages or anything like that, or did you just like right click, add Stripe /API, somewhere inside of Nhost configuration?
Okay, so what you need to do is basically two things. So you need to create this function using this Nhost Stripe GraphQL
package,
npm package. So here we're just creating a Stripe GraphQL server, and this is kind of like what your documentation, but we've like made it GraphQL compliant, if that makes sense. So it's a GraphQL server. There is not everything is there, but most of the important things are there. So once you have that up and running, now you have a GraphQL API directly to Stripe. And And okay, so what you also need to do is set, you need to set an environment variable specifying, what is it, Stripe _SK, like secret key something. I will not show it here because I'm not sure which one I have exactly here. But so you just need to specify that in an environment variable, and then you're good to go. So now you have connected. Now you have Stripe GraphQL API. You have the correct environment variable with a secret. And the second thing you need to do is, and now I need to go to Hasura console to just reload this. You need to add it as a remote schema. So here I'm adding it as a remote schema. I'm specifying Nhost backend URL, v1 functions, GraphQL Stripe, and you can see GraphQL/Stripe is exactly GraphQL Stripe. It's this file I'm pointing to. And then the absolute last thing you need to do is create that relationship between your table and Stripe. And so to show you super quickly, so I'm saying that my Postgres database, my profiles table should be connected to my remote schema Stripe, and then I'm saying like the customer ID should always be Stripe _customer ID. This is a column on the profiles table.
Right. Okay.
So this one will be so this makes it so I can automatically go from users to profiles to Stripe, because the Stripe customer ID will be automatically filled in here.
Got it. Okay. So that pretty much, like, once I have that package, a lot of what I need will be wired up for me. And then now it's just a matter of, like you said, like coming in here and like I can do the mapping for the schema or anything else that I need to do after that.
Yeah. And that's pretty nice, because that allows you to do things like like what I mentioned before. Do I have it still here? Maybe. So I mean, a very common use case for me, at least when I'm building this type of product, is when I want to show invoices, for people. So I can just do the data ID. I should PDF. So nice. You can imagine this being like a settings page, and I want to show the username. Maybe I want to show the email of the user, and then I want to list invoices for the user, and I can just enumerate here. And here's a link. This is from your Stripe GraphQL API, and it's available. I'll download an invoice. It's an example invoice I just did before we jumped on the show here.
Got it. Nice. I like it.
Thanks.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left, a little bit under 10 minutes left. And so there's a couple of things I wanted to make sure that we talked about. So one would be, in terms of Nhost IO, like the hosted service, right? Like, how do I get started? You know what I mean? Like, is there like a trial tier that I could use? There are free tiers. You know what I mean? Is there an open source hobbyist tier? Like how do I get started? And then I'd also, after that, like to talk about locally, like what do I need on my machine to start like writing code locally?
Yeah, good question. I think the easiest way to get started is to go to our website, sign up, and create a new project. And we have a free tier, so we want to support people who want to build projects on their side and try things out. So yeah, you can just go here, create a project name, and specify a region where you want it to be hosted at, and create a project, and that's it. And then you will have everything available that we spoke about here for the last 55 minutes. Right. It will be available. It takes 1 or 2 minutes to spin up, and you will have everything there. And then I would recommend you to go to our GitHub. So once you have that up and running, play around, create a few tables, test the GraphQL API, maybe add a user, just get comfortable. And then after that, you can go into our GitHub repository, into our examples folder. And here's a few examples in Next.js or React, and also with different GraphQL clients like Apollo or I don't know how to pronounce it, GQ2TY or whatever.
I have no idea what that is.
React, Graph or React Query. Like we have a few, or Vue. And here you can go in to see, okay, how do I connect my backend with my front end. Maybe you want to use Next.js. So here you can see how you can do that. And if you get stuck, like we have, I would say, pretty decent documentation. You can go here to Next.js, for example. We just show you, okay, you can install Next.js like this. You hook in with a provider, and then you're off. Then you're good to go. And now you can, I don't know, sign in someone with a SMS, or maybe what is more, maybe email and password. Like we provide hooks here, so you can just hook it in and sign up someone.
Oh, nice. And you support passwordless. I love that. I love that feature.
Yeah, it's great. We also support, we have a few ones. I think we also released, I don't know if you know about, what was it, security keys. I don't know if you know about security keys.
Are those like the UB keys? Is that what that is? Is that what we're talking?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So they're really cool. So you can sign up with, I don't know, Touch ID or Face ID on your iPhone. So yeah, we recently added that one.
Nice.
Which makes it very, very easy to do. But yeah, it's also easy to sign in with. We have a lot of sign-in providers like Apple or Discord, Facebook, GitHub, whatever. Oh no, I should probably rotate these keys.
That's fine. But like you said, like you could toggle those on and off, and then you could rotate the keys, and you could, whatever it is that you need to do. It's just a matter of like, toggling. But in my code, I'm gonna guess that like I just use one of those API calls, right? And then Nhost will just figure out the rest for me.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So we saw that part. So locally, like what does my dev setup have to look like? Right. Like I think you've been using VS Code, but I'm guessing I could use like any JavaScript editor. I don't know. I know a lot of folks may have like extensions for IDEs and stuff like that. Is that a thing that y'all have? I know you have a CLI also. So again, like what is like the local setup kind of look like?
Yeah, we have a CLI. So what you need is Docker installed on your computer, because we spin up Docker containers under the hood. So that's what you need. Other than that, you can use any editor, as you say. So because once you have the CLI installed with Docker, now you can just hook it. Now you can just hook your backend to any front end. So now most of your work is going to be happening in React, for example. Because we will spin up the dashboards locally here as well for you. So yeah, you just point, like it's very, very simple. You just point and click to create your tables. And all the fun things are still happening in the front end, I would say.
Nice. Awesome. All right, and looks like Tim answered us. So Tim had asked us that original question about webhooks. He says, it's a new Stripe product. I just don't know if webhooks are available for it yet. All right, so Tim, I would tell you on my side, because since I work at Stripe, so Link, which is, I guess, a part of checkout or associated with checkout, it sends out the same webhooks like the other ones do. So for instance, when you check out, you'll get a checkout session completed, or a customer created, or payment method saved, or one of those types of webhooks. So I'm saying like we didn't need to create any new webhooks. Like all of the standard ones still apply. Link is kind of like a quality of life product. You know what I mean? So again, it still relies on some of that existing infrastructure that we have. So hopefully that answers your question. Hopefully that makes more sense to you. Shameless plug, really quick. I think coming probably next month and a little bit after that, we will be talking about Link some more. We're going to set up some streams and content and videos and things of that nature about Link. So stay tuned for that. If that's something that you're interested in, definitely make sure you subscribe to the channel and pay attention, because we're going to be talking about that going forward. Let's see. Yeah, that looks like it for questions. No more questions yet. All right, so we're still on the doc site, it looks like, and like you were mentioning, it looks like we could do Next.js. You support Redwood.js, Vue.js, React, but then we also said earlier, if I had any GraphQL compliant client, right, that I could be able to use it, right? So if I had, I don't know, like a Django thing or a ASP.NET or whatever the case is, right? I could set up Nhost, right, like with my data, and I could connect it to Stripe and any other remote host that I have. and I could still just make regular GraphQL calls for it, right? But then now I can control my UI in my own space. But everything else should be the same, right? Like I could still have my event triggers, I could still have like those hosted functions that you spoke about, my GraphQL schemas, my my federation, and then now I'm just again, it's just HTTP, right? We're just calling into the hosted system to be able to service me that information.
Yes, 100%, 100%.
Awesome, cool. All right, well, Johan, there's no more questions, and we have about 5 seconds left. So before we go, I mean, do you have anything that any last things that you want to share with the audience? Features you have coming up, things that you might want to get help with, issues you want comments on, like anything at all that you'd love to get a little bit of help, support, eyes on, anything like that. Let us know. Conferences you're speaking to, anything like that.
I think if you like what you saw and what I showed you, feel free to go to our GitHub and give us a star. It means a lot to get visibility into our product. We love open source, so give us a star. That's nice. If you're building with Nhost, we always welcome issues. If you find small things or new ideas that you might have, or maybe if you want to contribute with SDKs for Ruby or Python or C#, feel free to do so as well. Like we love helping out in and get contributions from the open source community. That's where we live every day. So I think that should be the important message. I think our repo, that's where everything happens.
Cool. And again, so for folks that are watching, the repo is being shown right now on the screen. I just went over and started. So make sure you go over and start too. Try it out. I believe y'all are also on social media. Y'all are on Twitter and some other places too. So if you want to send them a tweet, a message, or whatever the case is, a DM or something of that sort, feel free to go ahead and do that. But with that being said, my friend, thank you so much for being on here. This is really cool. I learned a lot today for sure, and I'm sure our guest did as well. And obviously, feel free. Anytime you want to come back on, we'd definitely love to have you and talk about any of the new things that you have going on with Nhost and any of the other projects you got.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. So with that being said, thank you all. Again, this is going to be our last Dev Chats for 2022. We'll be back next month. Next month is 2023. It's kind of crazy to say that, but yes, next month we'll be back 2023 with some new guests and topics and tons of amazing content when it comes to Stripe. So I hope you all have a wonderful new year, and we'll see you all soon. Bye, everybody.